this was a really tough month. There's honestly like two or maybe three movies that I think would have a good shout at being that movie in a month. In fact, if it was a lesser month, I think any of these movies would have been a worthy winner. But it came down to one movie for me, and it was the movie Anora.
Yeah,
Which
same.
yeah, I mean
Yes.
it was close. There was ones I really enjoyed this month, but I thought it was just really creative and weird and interesting. And I should say, by the way, this is our Christmas episode. So
Mm,
I have done my due diligence and I've created a little Christmas cracker joke for all these movies. And I just want
okay.
to highlight they're meant to be bad, okay? I didn't necessarily come up with all I didn't necessarily come up with all of these either, by the way. Some of them, there's some furious Googling, but and this
Okay.
is one this is really just hitting with my people in my local area. I don't know if this is going to work. This might go over the head of people from the rest of Ireland. Do you hear they're remaking Anora in Cork? It's going to be called Tanora.
It's
That
going to
was
be a
sorry.
long
Jared
show.
just had to
This is
cut
the
out his
first one.
laughing there. Sorry,
This,
yeah,
this is
very
the
unprofessional.
first. Yeah, I was laughing so loud, unless you were watching the video where you could see my reaction, that my audio actually cut out because
Stunned
it.
into silence, he was.
This is just the
Oh,
first movie, guy. There, every movie, really, every.
everyone has a long way down, baby. Um, but yeah, look, Nora, like this is one that I've been talking about for a while.
Yes.
When I was like, it's coming out, it's coming out, it's coming out, it's coming out, and I think it absolutely delivered despite all that. I think what really was I found really interesting was as much as I was excited for this movie, and I'd seen some of the marketing, and I'd heard about the reaction it had got at Cannes and all these, obviously it won the Palme d'Or there. I didn't really know what it was. Like
Mm,
I just was like, oh, it's Mikey Madsen, and she's like a stripper, and she gets stuck in with some guy who's Russian guy who's kind of connected. That was all I knew. I didn't know if this was drama, comedy, and I got a lot more out of it because of that. Because there
mm.
are moments of drama, but it was really funny. Like
Yeah.
way more than I expected it to. Like there was a point watching this movie where the whole cinema was just laughing for a good minute straight. Where I was at the point where I'm like, I'm kind of missing what's happening next year because people are just still laughing. Um, but it is also quite dark. There is that kind of underbelly to it. But I think what's really impressive about Sean Baker as a filmmaker is like he always manages to do a good job of like putting the magnifying glass onto like kind of underserved people in the world. Like we're following kind of a sex worker here, and a lot of movies have treated them historically really bad. And he kind of does it in a way that's kind of reverential and interesting and shows the kind of human side of them. And I think because of that, the character that of Anora, that's Mikey Madison's playing, is really an excellent character. She's a
Mm.
character that they always manage to show as really really strong, despite the fact she's often in a situation where she's kind of in ways powerless. I thought she gave a fantastic performance. Like I'm familiar with Mikey Madsen from like the Scream movies. I know I've seen her in a few other things as well, but this is like forget about it. Like this is star making turn. Like she is like on the map now, like no one's business. And I also think that it's a movie that puts a lot of spotlight on actors that again, where you're like apparently these are actors who are well known in like Russia and Eastern Europe. There's a not 0% chance that some of these actors I could see getting like nominations at the award season. Like we have a character called Igor, played by Yura Borisov, who's like just a henchman character, and he is incredibly scary at times, but also incredibly hilarious. And like the dynamic between him and Anora is one of the most interesting aspects of the movie, because we see a character kind of go from hatred and kind of being this kind of useless henchman that we don't expect to really be a fully formed character to being a really interesting character in general. There's lots of other characters in this that are just that it feels like they just put in the extra amount of effort to make them interesting. Like especially with the characters like our henchmen in movies, they so easy can just throw them aside and they can just be a heavy or pointless character. They did a great job here, and I think like if you were to compare this movie to other movies, it's a weird one. It's like a fantastic mixture between maybe an Uncut Gems, Hustlers, Fargo, and there was another one in there that's slipping my mind. But those are kind of what I would like. Again, all great films, all fairly different.
Mm.
So putting them all together, surprisingly, really, really worked. My only criticism is that maybe it's a little bit long. It's about 2 hours 20 minutes. I did kind of think towards the end it was like, okay, wrap it up a bit now. But I was never bored, and the movie always managed to kind of win me over. It's a very stressful film at times. Like it's very, very, very tense. But I was never bored watching it. I was always entertained. I got into the drama aspect of it. Even the kind of, I mean, calling it like a romance, which is kind of what the genre on like the label is on IMDb and Wikipedia are saying. It's maybe a little bit of a stretch. I mean, there's romance elements to it, and I thought it was very clever watching it because I was like, it's like a fairy tale. And then I walked out of the cinema and looked at the poster and was like, it literally says that on the poster, Tom. It literally says that. You probably saw that earlier, ignored it, and we're like, yeah, you're so clever. Pat on the back. It, um, but it does have that kind of fairy tale like quality to it that really works. But it does that in a warped sense in that it's full of sex, nudity, drugs, violence, but not in a way that I felt egregious like a lesser movie would have. I think this is one that it's going to be interesting seeing how this does at award season because it's not the usual kind of thing the Academy would go for. I think it is kind of a little bit odd. It is a little bit weird and funny and kind of dare I say taboo in the wrong, even though it's not. You know what I mean? But it deals with taboo subject matter. But I think it's excellent. I would implore anyone to check this out because no, it's a really really interesting comedy, dark comedy. In the time where we don't really necessarily get these type of movies anymore, there's a lot of debate lately about kind of where the comedy film genre has gone. It kind of has warped into something like this, and I think it's the better for it if it's giving us movies like Anora.
Yeah. I echo a lot of what you say, and obviously this is my movie of the month. But one thing I'd say is that I didn't find this difficult. Like I saw this. This was one of the first movies I saw in November, and I was like, "That's not going to be beat," and it wasn't. And I get what you're saying because November was a really strong month for movie of the month. But for me, it was a case of if Anora wasn't here, this would be the movie of the month. You know what I mean? And that's where I struggled a little bit. For me, though this was clear, and I think it's going to clean up at awards because I think it is different, but it's different in that kind of way Hollywood fancies itself as we're being cool and voting to different movies. Like they gave Everything Everywhere a
Everything
couple of
on
years
all at
ago.
once is what I
Yeah,
was going
yeah,
to say.
exactly. And that Parasite as well. They'll do that every few years, like where it's like we're gonna give a cool movie, and that's what this is. It's written and directed obviously by Sean Baker, following up on the excellent Red Rocket. For anyone who hasn't seen it or doesn't know much about it, it's inspired by an actual kind of Russian American newlywed who was kidnapped and wanted to humanize sex workers. Actually, Baker hired a former sex worker turned actress and writer, Andrea Verhun, as a consultant for this. It's the first American movie to win a Palme d'Or at Cannes since The Tree of Life in 2011. Mikey Madsen was cast in the lead role without having to audition after performances in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Scream. And I was actually kind of worried coming into this movie because in reading up on the background to it, like they didn't have an intimacy consultant on this because like apparently Baker and his wife were very I don't know, they're very hands-on in
I
crafting
read
and
that. It sounded like a very
showed
weird dynamic between
yeah,
the
it
two of them at the
sounded like
start. Yeah.
and I read all that before I was going in, and I'm like, is this going to be weird? Like, but it wasn't. It was weird in all the right ways. I agree with all the comps you had, but for me, what came to mind is like one, it's like a prestige Zola for anyone who's
I
seen
was
that movie.
I was about to cut you off. I was going to say I
Yeah,
forgot to mention Zola.
yeah. It's like a prestige movie, and that also reminded me quite a lot of a Tarantino early kind of caper.
Yeah.
But like, what if that happened? And this is where I think it reaches into Oscar territory because it has all the fun and excitement and action. And what it reminded me of in a Tarantino caper is Tarantino, especially in the early days, if you think of John Travolta and Sam Jackson in for me the greatest movie of all time, Pulp Fiction. Okay, it's like what if stuff went wrong while you're being this badass hitman? And that's what Tarantino was interested in, and that's what this movie is very much interested in. But where Tarantino kind of goes off into the nerdy, which I love and appreciate, he's my favorite filmmaker. Sean Baker likes to get into the emotional side of things, okay? What if this caper went wrong? It would be funny for this, and this reason. There's a big debate, and again, to bring up Kermit and Mayo and be a proper fanboy, they're having a big debate over whether the home invasion scene, that by the way, the film, by the way, was shot in 37 days. The home invasion scene is kind of the signature piece of it, and kind of what you've probably seen of this if you've seen any ads. That's kind of the thing that's stuck with you. There's a debate around whether that's funny or not, and for me, I'm like, yes, it's a comedy scene. Like, it's not a debate. It is a comedy scene. It is designed to be funny, but it's not funny in the Tarantino sense of Brad Pitt throwing paint bucket at a woman and that being funny because it's so unexpected, where it's kind of disturbingly funny. It's funny because this small punchy stripper is like at every stage out fighting and out thinking all of the goons, and they're so hapless in being able to trap her, and that's what made it funny. But it's also disturbing in the same way. That's the core of what makes this movie work. The humor in it all also lies hand on hand with the drama of it all, because at the end of it, it's a character study on Anora, and it's very empathetic towards her character. She's an instinctively sassy kind of person, and we get a real good insight into what life is like working in a strip club. Like, they're bitching about the clients they have. They're kind of being their boss isn't going to win manager of the year. He's just a guy saying non-politically correct stuff to the girls. And Honora is she's got that sass and fight in her from growing up in that world, and rage is her first defense mechanism. But at her core, she was kind of built that way by a cruel world where her boss just knew her as the Russian girl. Even though she's not Russian, she can just speak Russian, but that's her identity in the place she spends most of her time. And in this movie, she's put in a position where she's kind of taunted with the prospect of getting a better life and a route out of that. And then that's just ripped away from her out of nowhere. And what makes it different from Tarantino movies is Sean Baker is interested in going, how would she feel? How would that impact her? How would she react? And we see her lash out, but then there's a scene, and I won't give any details around it. I'll just tell you about the impact of the cinema, because my cinema was very much like yours, Tom, of constant laughter throughout the movie, because it is very, very funny. The dialogue's very funny, and the acting is fantastic, but also very realistic. So you feel like you're in this situation with these people. But then the movie ended in stunned silence, like we just watched Schindler's List.
Yeah.
And to do that, to have people who are just enjoying this romp, and like, what I don't like about the debate about is it a comedy or not, is it funny or not, it's like, yes, it's funny, but it's taking people who are there for the funny and it's making them at the end think about the impact on this person and what happens when all of that falls down. And that is brilliant, because like, it makes space for emotion, it makes space for realism, it makes space for character, it makes space for empathy, it makes space for humanization. And that's what makes this different, but never in a preachy way. It's such an easy watch. It's something you can find yourself constantly going back to. It is fantastic. It is my favorite Sean Baker piece, and that's saying something because I love everything he does. I loved seeing you mentioned Igor there, Yuri Borisov. I saw him in Compartment Number 6, and he was fantastic in that. He plays really complex characters well. Like, you can play, you have your notions about this person, and he can just really play with that. And he did it in Compartment Number 6, and he did it even better here because he had to be comedic in it without having jokes to say. I thought he was fantastic. I thought Mikey Madsen absolutely knocked it out of the park. And I thought this movie, the next show we're on, we won't be doing December at the movies. We'll be doing our top 10 movies of the year. I'm going to be talking about this in that. Like, I'm not going to give anything away about where it'll be, but it jumped straight in there. And for me, even in this absolute gauntlet of a month where all we had essentially this year's version of Barbenheimer dropping Glicked, although it didn't release on the same day over here, which makes that awkward. But we had these huge movies and these really, like, we're getting into award season as well. So we're getting these really under the radar movies as well that are excellent. Nothing came close to this. It was fantastic. I loved it. That's Anora. So please, guys, do yourself a favor and check it out.